Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of The Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's video, we will discuss 5 important topics as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your larger understanding of the current affairs. The topics are as follows. In the first article, we will read about the issues related to unplanned urbanization and its social impact. Then in the second article, we will read about the impact of climate change on women and the urgent need of women-led climate action. In the third article, we will read about Global Hepatitis Report of 2024. In the fourth article, we are going to inquire about the benefits of telemedicine, and in the fifth article, we will read about the Higgs boson or the God particle. Towards the end, there will be news snippets especially curated for the upcoming prelims examination, so stay tuned. The editorial in Hindu highlights the issues associated with unplanned urbanization in our country and thus demand the immediate attention of the government for imperative reforms. These issues associated with unplanned urbanization and its social impact forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the larger theme of urbanization, its problem and remedies. Well, as per the World Cities Report of 2022, more than 40% of the Indian population will be living in urban areas by the year of 2030 itself. Thus, rampant urbanization has become a characteristic feature of the Indian society. So let's first try to understand what are the driving factors behind urbanization in our country. Well, as per the author of the report, there are 3 prime reasons. The first is colonialism, which gave birth to port cities such as Calcutta, Chennai and Bombay. Then there were 2 other factors such as the Green Revolution of 1970s, which is characterized by the huge growth in agricultural production, and the period of neoliberalization, which was followed by the technological boom after the year of 1991. Then there are several other key pull factors which attract the masses toward the cities. First of them being is the economic opportunities which are offered by the cities. The cities with their heavy industries and high paying jobs attract the youth towards it. As per the Niti Aayog, 70% of India's GDP will be produced by these urban areas by the year of 2030. Then obviously there is better infrastructure where the cities have to offer high quality education, better healthcare infrastructure as well as swift transportation mode. For example, more than 60% of the hospitals and qualified doctors reside in these cities. Then these cities has become a melting pot of different culture, thus giving birth to the cosmopolitan culture, where an individual experiences high degree of freedom from the traditional and religious customs which act as a barrier on the growth of the individual. Also, in these cities, there is higher control on the decision-making power by an individual and thus providing them more sense of freedom. Then there exist several push factors in rural areas which drives the population out of the rural areas. The first of them is obviously the poor infrastructure such as poor healthcare, poor education. For example, even though 60% of the colleges in the country are in rural areas, these institutes are mired with low quality of education, poor infrastructure, high teacher to pupil ratio as well as issues such as proxy teachers. Then there is obviously lack of employment opportunities in rural areas because of less penetration of industries there, ultimately leading to poorer living standards and high issues of poverty. All these push and pull factors has ultimately led to the swelling of cities, which can be seen from the graph, where there has been rampant increase in urban population, specifically between the period of 1990 to 2020. And as we can see, this population is further going to swell in the upcoming reasons. And such rampant urbanization has led to the issue of unplanned growth, where according to the Niti Aayog, more than 60% of more than 4,000 statutory towns in our country, they lack any kind of master plan. And even if such master plan exists, they are incapable to deal with the demand of mega cities because these mega cities are run on archaic laws and outdated models. For example, the designing of drainage is based on the Water Act of 1974 or regulation of industries on the basis of Air Pollution Control Act of 1981. Then even if the authorities there try to form such all comprehensive framework, they are unable to do so because of the existence of multiple bylaws and development regulations, such as the Model Building Code of 2016. And thus this haphazard growth which has taken place and the large number of population which has come in, it leads to the difficulty of acquisition and rehabilitation of the current residents because of the right to property as a legal right under Article 300A. Then there is obviously one of a major reason, and that is the poor state of urban local governance under 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, where as per the IIHS report, these urban local bodies are mired with poor fiscal status, where their own source of revenue exists as low as 40%. And the property tax, which forms the major component of their own source of revenue, it stands at only 0.15% of the GDP of the country, while for other developing nations such as China, it is up to 2% of GDP. Thus, it is obvious that because of such intermittent tax revenue or non-buoyant source of revenue, these urban local bodies are heavily dependent on intergovernmental transfers. And these issues are further compounded because of the conflict which takes place between the elected officials at the city level, such as a mayor, and the government officer, which is the district magistrate, who act as the chief executive officer of the block level. These unplanned urbanization is not devoid of any grave consequences, which has ultimately manifested them in several aspects. The first is, as per the study of K. Sanyal and R. Bhattacharya, which has been also reported in the report, which talks about the stark inequality which exists in our cities, where on one side we can see tall luxurious 7-star hotels, luxurious apartments, international schools, good quality healthcare, hospitals, etc. And on the other side of the city, we can see that there exists a large population which lives in low income groups as well as in the swelling of slums, which ultimately leads to the socio-spatial hierarchical systems, which is reflected from the Oxfam report of 2023, according to which 1% of the population holds 42% of the assets. And as per the National Council of Applied Economic Research report of 2023, 25% of the population lives in slums. And these slums have a huge negative multiplier effect, where the people who are living in these slums, they have poor standard of life, poor access to health and education. Also, because these slums has been burgeoning over the years, it has led to the encroachment of public land. And these slums can also become a hotbed for any kind of disease spread, as it was seen during the time of COVID in Dharavi. Also, these unplanned urbanization and rising slums in the cities has also leads to a lot of social issues such as theft, rape, various kind of addictions, and the rising acts of violence such as road rages, which has become a common sight on the road. As it was observed by Krishna in Mahabharata, such social issues of theft and addictions take place in the society when someone has got everything and someone has nothing. Then there is also the issue of high cost of living as well as the high rental rate of official spaces. As per the Global Livability Index of 2023, Delhi and Mumbai has ranked at the 141st place, being expensive to live. Thus, there is obviously a large section of population which cannot even afford to live in the cities and thus can have access to quality education and healthcare. Then obviously, because of this rampant urbanization, there exists a poor drainage network. And as we have seen that with the rising extreme weather events being caused by climate change, these poor drainage network can bring halt to the urban life as well as can lead to huge losses in life and property, which was seen during the Delhi flood of 2023 or Chennai flood of 2015. Also, these rampant urbanization has led to the congestion of cities and huge traffic issues, which ultimately lead to the loss of the time of an individual and ultimately the drain of human capital. For example, Bangalore has become infamous as the city which never moves. Then obviously this urbanization is having a huge impact on the environment, where for example the World Health Report of 2022, 14 of the 20 world's most polluted cities is in our country. Also, as per the Central Groundwater Board, Delhi is going to completely run out of the groundwater by the year of 2025, thus showcasing the impact of urbanization on natural resources. And it has further created urban heat islands where there are certain regions which has got such high temperature that it ultimately causes huge drain of energy and has severe impact on the health of human. Thus, to tackle with these issues, the government has taken several steps. First is, it has launched the Smart Cities mission, where we are trying to create climate smart cities. Then under the Atal mission for rejuvenation and urban transformation, we are trying to increase the water supply under the Jal Jeevan mission. Then we are trying to create non-motorized and public transport facilities, parking spaces. At the same time, we are trying to improve our drainage system as well as creating sewerage and septage management. Also, to create complete recycling of urban waste or solid waste which is being generated is a component of Swachh Bharat mission. Then to tackle with the issue of slum, the government has launched Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana with a larger theme to provide housing for all. At the same time, under Budget 2023, the government has launched Urban Infrastructure Development Fund to ensure the development in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities by granting various kind of funds and concessional loans. So when the development in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities will take place, it will ensure that the people will not move in such large numbers to these urban cities. Also, for this purpose, the government has created a rapid regional transition system, where the government is trying to create semi-high speed rail corridors, so that let's say if someone is living in the region of Meerut, that person can effectively travel to Delhi in a very short span of time, let's say 55 minutes. Thus, even if the job opportunities is in the city, the people from far-flung regions can flock in, work and go back to their house, thus reducing the problem of congestion in the cities. However, there are several other steps which are imperative. First and foremost is to strengthen the urban local governance. Then we shall adopt nature-based solution systems such as adopted by the Singapore, and we can also adopt global best practices under the G20 Smart City Alliance which India has joined. With these suggestions, we move forward to the next news of the day. In a previous lecture, we covered about the impact of climate change on our country. In this particular segment, we are going to focus about the impact of climate change on women. As the lead editorial by Dr. Soumya Swaminathan has highlighted the disproportionate impact of climate change which take place on women, and thus she has given the clarion call for women-led climate action, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the theme of climate change and of GS2 paper under the theme of issues related to women. So let's first try to understand what is the status of impact of climate change on women. Well, as per the report, with increasing frequency of extreme weather events and the climate-induced natural hazards which are taking place, as per the Council of Energy, Environment and Water, 75% of the districts in our country are vulnerable to hydro-made disaster such as cyclone, flood, drought, etc. And more than 50% of the women who are living in these 75 districts are vulnerable to various kind of disaster risk. Then, as we have covered earlier, that there has taken place a feminization of agriculture, which has taken place because the men has moved to the cities to seek non-farm jobs. Now these women who are indulged in various kind of agricultural activity, as with the impact of extreme weather events such as flash flood or flash drought, if the agricultural productivity will decline, the resultant nutritional insecurity, the burden of it will be actually be borne by these women. As per the journal Frontiers in Sustainable Food System, India ranked as the 12th most vulnerable country to the climate change impacting the women who are indulged in these agri-food systems. Then obviously with the increasing cases of drought, there will be increased demand for water, labor and natural resources, where women, because of their dual role syndrome, they are associated with the work of going to large distances to fetch water. Now, as let's say if the drought is taking place in a particular area, the chances are that the groundwater will further decline, and at the same time maybe these water resources will further move away. Thus, the work burden on the women will further increase. Also, there exist social issues such as Pani Bais of Maharashtra, where the women from vulnerable communities are actually married just for one reason, and that is to fetch water for domestic duties. Then, as per the International Labour Organization study of 2020, with increasing heat wave, it will lead to loss of 2.2% of the total working hours. And ultimately, the productivity loss will be equivalent to 80 million full-time jobs by the year of 2030. And the majority of the burden of these job losses will also be borne by the women. Then, these heat waves can have specific impacts to the pregnant woman, where it can lead to preterm birth or the issue of eclampsia. Thus, the climate change has severe impacts such as crop failure, which ultimately increases the burden of women, the water scarcity, various kind of disease, fuel shortage, natural disasters as well as displacements, which obviously the forced migration can increase the vulnerability of the women. Then there are issues such as air pollution. As per the report, with every increase of 10 milligram per meter cube of the particulate matter of 2.5, it will lead to 9% increase in the cases of lung cancer, 3% increase in the cases of people who will suffer from various kind of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, as well as 4% increase in the cases of dementia. All these issues of declining crop productivity or increase in the working hour or various kind of disease which can take place, all this will significantly lead to time poverty, where as per the World Bank it is associated with dearth of time for women, so she can indulge in any kind of acquiring degree or acquiring a market oriented skill, which will ultimately lead to their mass unemployment. And these can, as per the UNESCO report, can lead to the forced marriages of the women, early pregnancy of the women, high maternal mortality ratio which is as high as 103 per 1 lakh live birth in our country, as well as issue of missing girls from the school. Then this issue of climate change is also correlated with gender-based violence, where as per the 6th IPCC report, this duty of fetching water from long distances is also associated with various kind of sexual abuse, as well as physical harm which is incurred by the women while fetching that water. Then if they are incapable to do so, they ultimately face domestic violence from their husband for not completing their daily task. Also, as per a study by JAMA Psychiatry, every increase of 1 degree Celsius in the temperature leads to 23% increase in physical violence, where the men resorts to consumption of alcohol, gambling, or ultimately expressing their frustration on women for the increasing socio-economic pressures. Thus, women and children are 14 times as likely as men to die during a disaster, and the climate change can lead to 158 million women and girls which will be pushed to the poverty by the year of 2050. Thus, the report led by Soumya Swaminathan demands for climate action which is led by the women, so they can provide better climate solutions. For example, the first women-led millet canteen in Purulia district by Dipali Mehto, or the across the country tree plantation drives in various government schools by Ipsita Prasad. Then there is urgent need to recognize the important role of tribal and rural women when it comes to environment conservation. A brilliant example of that is Narmada Bachao Andolan and the role of Medha Patkar. Then the government shall strive to provide the women collectives such as self-help groups and farmer producer organizations with knowledge and access to resources. At the same time, we shall aim to strengthen the local governance, where these urban local bodies and panchayats shall strive to first protect the vulnerable section from these increasing temperature or heat waves such as children, women and elderly people. Then we shall create a database to monitor the heat wave in that particular region and to provide early dissemination of warning to the larger populace. Then at the same time, these local governance can also provide for various kind of facilities such as public drinking water system or any kind of rehabilitation of people who cannot protect themselves from the climate change. At the same time, these local governance can also strive to rejuvenate traditional water conservation systems such as rainwater harvesting, various kind of blue spaces such as ponds, lakes, etc., which has been prevalent in our country since the ancient time of Indus Valley civilization, as prevalent from the example of Dholavira. Then we shall aim to apply gender lens or to recognize the gender vulnerability and to provide for gender transformative solutions under our National Action Plan on Climate Change and State Action Plan on Climate Change. And these steps will ultimately lead to women at the forefront, where they will act as a catalyst for climate change and sustainability. Is there any such steps which has already been taken place in our country? Yes, there is. First, very recently, Supreme Court recognized the right against the adverse impact of climate change as a fundamental right under Article 14, which provides for right to equality, and Article 21, which provides for right to dignified life. Also, the government has launched Mahila Kisan Sashaktikarana Pariyojana, under which we are trying to provide collateral-free loans to the women to increase their access to credit, and at the same time they are being imparted knowledge even to deal with the climate change under Krishi Vigyan Kendra. Then the government has adopted the New Delhi Declaration at the G20 platform, where we are aiming to reduce the gender gap and provide empowerment to the women, especially in various fields of economy. Then there are also certain local initiatives. So whenever you guys are trying to write the mains answer, you can also inculcate several local steps which has large significance at the national level as well. One of such initiative is carbon neutral initiative being implemented in Wayanad, Kerala, where there is a community driven approach to adopt for environment sustainable practices, which has been led by the Kudumshri model of Kerala. Then the Maharashtra government has launched Women for Climate Mentorship under the C40 Alliance. And then there is Mahila Housing Trust of Ahmedabad, where women specifically from the marginalized communities are being trained that how they can adapt to the various challenges which are being thrown to them by the climate change. Also, there are several other steps which are imperative to enhance the role of women and ultimately fulfill the women-led climate action, which keep in mind is very necessary to achieve two important targets. One is the Paris Agreement of 2015, under which we are trying to limit the rise in the temperature up to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of 21st century. And then our ambitious Panch Amrit target, where we are aiming for carbon neutrality by the year of 2070. With these suggestions, we move forward to the next news of the day. As per the Global Hepatitis Report of 2024, India has the second highest burden of the chronic hepatitis disease, which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of health and government interventions. So let's first try to understand what is hepatitis. Hepatitis is basically an inflammation or breakage of organic tissues of the body, which significantly impacts the liver, and it is caused by hepatotrophic or liver oriented viruses which have several strains such as A, B, C, D and E. Keep this in mind that from our perspective, B and C is the most important one, as they are the most chronic disease and can lead to various impact on human body such as nausea, vomiting, loss of eyesight, jaundice, etc. And they are also very fatal, and it can lead to high rate of death. Now keep this in mind, few important statements related to hepatitis B and C for your prelims perspective. The first is that both hepatitis B and C are transmitted through blood transfusion or the use of unsafe injection, or if the human body has been contacted with the blood of the infected person. Keep this in mind that both hepatitis B and C can be transmitted from mother to child during the delivery of the birth. However, this is where the similarity ends, and there are certain characteristic differences between hepatitis B and C. The first is that while hepatitis B is a DNA based virus, hepatitis C on other hand is a RNA based virus. The incubation period for hepatitis B is up to 90 days, while for hepatitis C it is 45 days. Also, sexual transmission of hepatitis B is very common while it is very rare for hepatitis C. More than that, there is a very important difference, and that is that while the vaccination is available for hepatitis B, there is no availability of vaccine for hepatitis C, and it can only be cured by giving some antiviral drug treatments. Now we will inquire about the findings of the Global Hepatitis Report of 2024. According to which India has the second highest prevalence of viral hepatitis and thus has the 11% of the global burden. As you guys can see that out of the total share of hepatitis B, in the globally there is 254 million or around 2.97 crore patients, out of which the proportion in our country is around 11.7%. In India, we have 29 million of the population who are impacted from hepatitis B, out of which only 2.4% is diagnosed and 0% was treated in the year of 2022 as per this report which has been released by the World Health Organization. Then when it comes to the hepatitis C, the global case is about 50 million. India has the share of around 5.5 million, out of which 28% of the people were diagnosed and 21% of the people were treated. Thus, to deal with this issue of hepatitis, the government has taken several steps. The first is the National Viral Hepatitis Control Program, which aims to curb this disease and eliminate it as a public threat by the year of 2030. Then during the COVID period, there was COBAS 6800, a testing machine which was launched by the Ministry of Health Affairs for the testing of hepatitis B and C in our country. Further, we provide impetus on various kind of cleanliness drive and to infuse the characteristic of a clean and healthy lifestyle under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Keep this in mind that the vaccination of hepatitis B, which as per the report there was 0% treated case, the vaccination for this hepatitis B is completely free under the universal immunization program which Ministry of Health Affairs runs. Thus, there are several issues such as under-diagnosis, low level of treatment and low level of awareness among the larger public. To tackle which, it is very important that government shall take imperative steps and create a broad structure of National Viral Hepatitis Management Unit, where we have created from national level to sub-district level chain of officers which has been given specific task to diagnose, treat and ultimately curtail the spread of hepatitis in our country, which ranges from your primary health care system and ultimately goes up to your state program steering committee. These steps are imperative to ensure the curtailment of hepatitis in our country and to ultimately achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 3 of health and well-being for all. With this, we move forward to the next news of the day. The recent report in Hindu highlights various uses of telemedicine in the health sector of the country as well as various positive impact it can have on environment. As per the report, the telemedicine can help us in achieving our carbon neutral targets as well. How? We will find out. Well, the telemedicine forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the theme of health and government interventions. So let's first try to understand what exactly is telemedicine. Well, if you guys have watched a very famous movie, Three Idiot, where the protagonist of the movie, Rancho, calls his girlfriend, who happens to be a doctor, and asks her to assist him in a delivery of a child, which she ultimately does by using video call. That is exactly the example of telemedicine, which according to World Health Organization is basically the delivery of various kind of healthcare services by healthcare professionals using information and technology for diagnosis, treatment and prevention of disease. Now, this telemedicine has several benefits to offer, such as better treatment outcomes, improved patient engagement and satisfaction, as well as healthcare cost reduction, which according to the report telemedicine does by reducing the time and expenses. How it can do so? Let's say that I am living in a particular rural area, which is a rural area of Madhya Pradesh. According to the National Health Authority, there was a study conducted in the rural areas of Madhya Pradesh where the nearest hospital was more than 5 kilometers away from one particular village. Thus, if I am living in such a rural area and I want to access healthcare, all I need to do is to have a smartphone and internet connection. And with that, I can just connect with a very expert doctor who can diagnose my symptoms, who can advise me certain medicines, and if there is a local doctor available, he can also facilitate surgery by guiding that particular doctor. In this particular way, it can lead to the huge reduction in time and expenses, as also shown by the study of LVPI of Hyderabad, according to which it can lead to the cost reduction of 29,100 per patient in rural areas and 3.45 lakh reduction per patient in urban areas. Also, as we have seen, it can aid the poor rural healthcare infrastructure by offering various kind of services such as telesurveillance, telediagnosis, telemonitoring of the health of a person, telesurgery, as well as tele-education and teleconferencing to enhance the skill level of the doctors which are present in the rural areas. Then it can also have significant impact on environment to achieve our Panch Amrit targets. How? Well, as per the report, 88% of the carbon dioxide emission which takes place in our country comes from the traffic sector, out of which healthcare emits 74 million ton of carbon dioxide reduction. As per the study, which was conducted in three particular cities for 3 month duration of time, it led to the reduction of 1,666 kilometers of travel reduction, as well as 176 kilogram of carbon dioxide reduction. Thus, as telemedicine is imperative and offers various kind of benefits in various sectors, the government has taken several steps. For example, it has launched eSanjeevani portal, which is basically a cloud-based integrated telemedicine solution, where there can be interactions which can take place between doctor to doctor as well as doctor to patient consultations. This eSanjeevani platform has been developed by Center for Development and Advanced Computing, which is basically a body under Ministry of Electronics and IT. Also, to further enhance this service, the government has launched Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, under which we are trying to create digital IDs of individual, which will ultimately lead to the creation of health records for individual across the healthcare sectors. It will improve the clinical decision making, it will ultimately improve the equitable access, and finally it will encourage the use of technologies such as telemedicine. Also, we shall strive to further improve the Digital India initiative to increase the internet penetration specifically in the rural areas, and thus we will be able to utilize the telemedicine's potential up to its optimum in the nearby future. With this, we move forward to the next news of the day. Very recently, the Nobel Prize winning physicist Peter Higgs who proposed the existence of the so-called God particle that explained how matter formed after the Big Bang, which took place 13.8 billion years ago, suddenly died at the age of 94. Thus, Higgs boson forms an important component of your upcoming prelims examination under the theme of science and technology. So let's first try to understand what exactly is Higgs boson. Higgs boson is basically a fundamental force which provides the mass to other fundamental particles. Thus, when other fundamental particles such as electron, proton, neutron or quarks, when they interact with the Higgs field, they eventually attain mass. This we can understand from the cocktail party analogy, where just imagine that you are a form of a party where the guests are evenly spaced and suddenly there enters MS Dhoni, and thus all the guests just rush towards him and forming a tight knot where everyone just wants a selfie. As the celebrity is passing through the room or he is trying to reach to the airport, the clump of guests who has surrounded MS Dhoni will form the additional momentum. Thus, the clump is harder to stop than one guest alone would have been, and so we can say that the clump has now acquired a mass. Thus, when a particle interacts with Higgs field, eventually it attains masses. And Higgs boson thus is one of the 17 elementary particles that make the standard model of physics, which explain that how the world which we see today came into existence. Here we can see the Higgs boson as the 17th particle, and there are other particles such as photon, then there is your electron, there is your top, bottom, there is your neutrino, etc. Also, the Higgs boson has a mass of 125 billion electric volt, which makes it 130 times more massive than proton. Keep this in mind that this Higgs boson has a zero spin or no angular momentum at all. Even though the existence of such a particle was proposed by Peter Higgs in the year of 1964, it was eventually discovered in July 2012 at the Large Hadron Collider experiment, which took place in 2012, where basically the protons were made of 3 quarks and they were basically held together by the gluons. So scientists, what they did, they fired these protons into the collider, and there were magnets who accelerated these protons up to the 99.99% of the speed of the light, which eventually created a situation which might have existed at the billionth second of after the Big Bang when it took place, and thus it ultimately showed the existence of Higgs field or Higgs boson, right? And this Large Hadron Collider is basically built by the European Organization for the Study of Nuclear Studies, which is also called as CERN, and it is located at the border of Geneva, Switzerland and France. Keep these important facts for your upcoming prelims examination very dear to you, and we move forward to the next segment of the news. In this particular segment, we are going to cover the news which are very relevant for your upcoming prelims examination. The first of them is CBDT or Central Board of Direct Taxes. Why it has been in the news? Because the Election Commission of India has recently directed the CBDT to verify the misinformation by Union Minister on the taxable income which he has shown to the electorate. Now keep this in mind that CBDT is a statutory body which is under the Central Board of Revenue Act of 1963. And it functions under the Department of Revenue under the larger ambit of Ministry of Finance, where its major function lies with pertaining of levy and collection of direct taxes and the supervision of Income Tax Department. The body consists of 6 members and is chaired by an officer who is selected from the Indian Revenue Services. Now here we will try to differentiate between the direct taxes and the indirect taxes. So the direct taxes which comes under the regulation of CBDT are your income tax, your capital gains tax, any kind of securities transaction tax, a prerequisite tax or a corporate tax. While the indirect tax segment forms your sales tax, service tax, any kind of custom or excise duty which you have paid, or the value added tax. Now we move forward to the next news, where we will talk about the world's largest elephant population, which exists in the country called as Botswana, as seen on the map here. Now the Botswana hosts a population of more than 1.3 lakh elephants, which ultimately covers more than 40% of the land area of Botswana. With such unchecked increasing population, Botswana is facing this issue of how to handle these elephants. Also, as the conflicts has increased in this particular area, these elephants has stopped their migration which they used to do, where they used to cross the Chobe river, which is basically a tributary of the Zambezi river, and they ultimately moved to Namibia. But now, because of the ongoing conflicts, the elephants has stopped this migration. Thus, as Botswana is unable to handle such a large population, it has offered to export its elephants to the country Germany in Europe, which is the largest European importer of African elephants. Keep Botswana in your mind. Remember these two rivers, Chobe and Zambezi, and we move forward to the next news, where we will talk about the right to privacy, which was held as a fundamental right under Article 21 in the landmark judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy 2017. Recently, in another judgment, Supreme Court held that any candidate who is fighting the election, let's say the upcoming 18th Lok Sabha election, that candidate also has a right to privacy, where the candidate is not required to lay down every detail about his or her personal life and possessions, etc. And if there is any such information which the candidate has chose to withheld from the electorate, it will be decided on case by case basis, and it will not amount to the corrupt practices under section 123 of RPA 1951. Then we will move forward to a kind of a missile defense system which was deployed by the Israel under the attacks which it is facing from Palestine, where it used a Sea Dome. Sea Dome is nothing but an advanced version of Iron Dome missile system of Israel, where there is a particular anti-missile launch system, and there is a radar which can detect the enemy missiles which is being fired on Israel. And then this anti-missile system just predicts that where that missile will be at a particular time on a particular length, and then it launches a missile and destroy that in the air itself, thus not having any impact on the territory. These kind of defense systems shall also be deployed by our country, as we are prone from attacks from our turbulent neighbors. With this, we have reached to the end of the discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video to test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation, and thank you.